Welcome to the Executives Lounge. This is your podcast host, Christine Fauner. We are officially in season 2, where we focus on redefining leadership, one amazing story at a time. Let's get started. We are coming at you today from Seattle, Washington. I have with me Thomasina Schmitt. She is the executive director at the nonprofit Seattle Neighborhood Group. Her organization educates, organizes, and collaborates with residents, businesses, government entities, and other organizations to create safe communities through equitable engagement with a focus on underserved populations. I'm incredibly excited to talk with Thomasina today and learn more and hear more about the work that she's doing in my hometown. And also, I'm incredibly excited to share her story with you today. Both of us are also graduates of Central Washington University. Welcome to the show, Thomasina.
Thank you. Go Wildcats.
Yeah, go Wildcats. So I also saw, as I was kind of looking through, thinking about introducing you, that you also have a musical background. Is that true?
Yeah. Flute is what I started with. And then when I got into college, I picked up viola and actually played with the community orchestra for a while. I've kind of gotten out of it, but my daughter's starting violin. And so it's inspired me to start getting back into practicing and getting my instruments out. So yeah.
Oh, how fun to be able to play together.
Yeah, I was thinking that'd be pretty sweet actually if we could do like a community concert together and
Well, and also being reminded of how screechy and hard it sounds
when you're starting off. Yeah.
Being from Seattle myself, when I first learned about your organization, I thought that was so cool. And then I really wanted to understand how you came into this work and why it's so important to you. So I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting journey. I was thinking about this. Like if you asked 10-year-old Thomasina if I would be doing what I'm doing today, I'd be like, no, no way. Because I was so into music. I loved watching like art stuff. I'd watch opera. I was just all about the arts and dance and everything. And that was my world, and studied music all through middle school, high school. I majored in it in college. I was a music business major. And my dream was to work for a major orchestra. Like Seattle Symphony was like my dream job. And I remember the first major orchestra that I saw was when I was 16. Our high school orchestra came to Seattle because I lived on the other side of the state. Took the big trip over to Seattle, which was like a big deal to us. And we got to hear the Seattle Symphony. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is my world. I want to live there. This is what I want to do.
The first time I ever saw them, it's big, loud, beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, the sound just kind of like, yeah, you feel it in your body. Yeah, absolutely. It was life-changing for me. Yeah. And so after college, I worked for a youth symphony, actually, Tacoma Youth Symphony. Did that for a few years. And I wanted to go to graduate school, but I also wanted to study abroad. And so I thought, well, maybe I can figure this out, how I can do it together. So I found an arts administration program in London. And it was a 1-year program. And it was great because I didn't have to do the GRE. And it was about the same amount as doing a graduate program here. And I thought, well, this is less time. I don't have to take this test. And I get to live in London for a year. That's amazing. And I had a friend who lived there. American friend who'd moved over there. So did that for a year. It was an amazing experience. And then when I moved back, I got to work for Seattle Symphony.
Wow, so the dream came true.
It did. I did it for 10 years. And I was in the education and community engagement department. And I did all the school programs, all the family programs. In the last 5 years, I focused on building the community programs, which was a really amazing experience. And as part of that, we were doing a lot of different partnerships with different nonprofits. And this is around the time, I got married and I had my first child. And it's, life kind of just shifted. And I thought, I loved my job. I loved what I was doing, but it was a lot, because it's like you're working all day and you got concerts in the evening, sometimes on the weekends. And I thought, I think I need a change here. And so, I was looking at other arts jobs, and then I thought maybe I need to look outside the arts, and I didn't want to look outside nonprofit because I kind of, I made peace with the fact that I'm a nonprofit person a long time ago.
Well, and tell me about this, because a lot of times when we talk about being in nonprofits, and I've worked nonprofits as well, there's an advocacy piece that becomes a part of who you are.
I feel like that's kind of where I feel comfortable in that world. And I remember after I got my master's degree, I had a bit of a a kind of a career crisis. It was like, okay, I've spent all this time and money. Like, do I really want to be in the art, or, be in nonprofit and in the arts and everything? Um, but I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Part of my passion place is helping people redefine what leadership is. And
Mhm.
the way I like to define it is really stepping into your impact and influence for the greater good and how that brings you joy. And
Mhm.
so to me, that was kind of that moment of crisis is you have all this education that you just spent money on. And how do you impact and influence in a way that you know is going to be meaningful? And I think it's really cool that you said, well, nonprofits are me. That's it.
Yeah, so I started looking at other jobs in the area, and there was one job that stood out to me, and it's a local organization that focuses on family homelessness. And that's actually something that's part of my own story. My family and I were homeless when I was in high school for about a year and a half. And so it was the mission really resonated with me. And I thought, this might be a good fit. And it was community engagement, which is what I had been doing at the symphony. So it felt like a good transfer to, those skills to move over there. And it was a director position, which was something that I was also wanting to do, is also move up in my career. When I was at the symphony, I was a manager, but hadn't made that director role. So it was kind of an opportunity to do something a little different, but then also advance in my career. So I was there for about 4 years. Yeah. And I learned a lot. They are really into like trauma informed work. So I learned so much about just how that all affects a person and their life and choices they make. So um, really grateful for that experience. And it also was in fundraising. And so I learned a lot about, just that world. Because when I was at the symphony, I was all about the program side of it. And it gave me
Mm.
a whole lot more appreciation for the development side of it. And I had seen some development people I'd worked with at the symphony, and I apologized to them. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't know how hard this was.
It
I get
is
now
really hard.
why you
It
wanted photos and why you wanted stories and why you kept asking for quotes, because I get it now. Like, you need that to help tell the story to donors. So it kind of gave me um a different perspective. And then, being a nonprofit, it's like, okay, you're going to have to learn how to fundraise. Like, it's just part of how it is. So so did that for a few years. Had a second child. And then it was kind of like, okay, well, what's the next step for me? And I really wanted to be an executive director. Like, this was something I'd been wanting for a very long time. And was thinking about, well, what type of organization would I want to work for? And I thought, something a little smaller for me, just, stepping into it. I wanted to be something that I obviously was very passionate about. And the role that I'm in now, I read the job description. It was kind of one of those experiences, you read something and you're like, yep, that's me, that's me,
That's
that's
me.
me.
That's
I can
me.
do this. I like doing that. It was just like, I need to apply for this. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. This is my first time applying. It was like the first job I'd applied for, actually, as to be an executive director. And like the next day I got a
Well, I'm
call.
going to stop there for a sec because
Yeah.
that's a big deal. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're stepping into, no, I'm ready to lead an entire organization, that's a big mind shift.
It was scary, honestly. Yeah. And I got a call from one of the board members who was on the hiring panel and scheduled an interview. And I remember coming in and walking up to what is now my office, but they're doing the interview here. And it was just like my heart was pounding. And it was just like these, I mean, not voices, but just like negativity. It was like, you don't
Mm.
belong here. You can't do this. You're not good enough. Who do you think you are applying for this? It was just like all this like noise. And I just had to be like, I got to just focus and just answer the questions as best I could. And of course, in my head, I'm thinking didn't go well. Afterwards, I was like, okay, well, that was good practice, I guess. But they called me back and for a second interview, and I got to meet the staff and met the full board and everything. And then I didn't hear from them for a couple of weeks. And so again, it was like, well, okay, I'm not sure if I got that or not. And then they called me and offered me the job. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And then, so this was like March 2020.
Oh,
Literally,
oh,
like,
look at that timing.
yeah, it was
Right before
crazy.
a global pandemic.
Exactly. Like, all that was buttoned up, I'd signed the contract and everything, and I was set to start in May. And then it was like, yeah, everything shut down. I ended up starting my job a month later, so June 2020. But there was so much happening. You remember, just in the
Yeah.
world,
Well, and
everything.
what a way to step into an executive director role.
So my first day was June 1st, and it was a Monday. And we have staff meetings on Mondays and Thursdays. So that was my first meeting with the staff. Was a virtual meeting, right? Because we were all still in
Right.
lockdown. And it was the weekend after George Floyd and all that stuff that had happened. And so I stepped into it. And the first thing I said was like, let's just take some space to talk about what happened over the weekend and how is everybody feeling about it. So it was kind of a pretty intense time, and in Seattle, we had the CHOP and all of that stuff going on. There was a lot of protests, a lot of unrest, and I felt kind of unprepared. I was like, who am I? Who am I to be in this position? Like, I don't even know
Well, a running
what I'm
theme
doing.
of this entire experience so far has been this like imposter syndrome. Like,
I know, right?
this like
Yeah.
just self-doubt,
Yeah.
self-criticism, but also like kind of big deal. The word authenticity is coming to mind for me for you. You're showing up authentically. I would like you to expand on that because for me, that's what I'm hearing.
In order to kind of get through that time, I had to say, okay, well, I'm here in this job for a reason. I'm a Christian, so I believe, that, God guides me. And it's like, okay, well, if God's put me in this position at this time, there's a reason for it. And obviously I've got the skills, or he'll give me the skills to figure this out and to get through it. And so I think all I could do is just talk with the team and be honest about what was happening and be open to working with everyone. That's kind of the philosophy of Seattle Neighborhood Group, is that we work with everyone. There was all that civil unrest that was happening, but there was also just the funding piece of it. We didn't know what was going to happen with our contracts. We weren't able to do a lot of the work. And so just trying to keep the organization afloat and keep the staff engaged and listening to them and trying to just keep them together. And then they're also getting to know me too. So there was that part of it as well. So
What are some of the things that you guys did in that pivot place that you adopted as part of your organization now?
we worked with a firm that worked through a theory of change. And I knew this woman actually from a previous job. And that was actually a good exercise to go through because we really had to talk about like, okay, who are we serving? What are we doing? Kind of what are the outcomes? And so I think that experience of kind of going through that as a team and talking through that stuff, I think really helped kind of solidify some things. This is our lane. We're going to stay in our lane, and this is who we're serving. We're going to serve these people. And as tempting as it may be to kind of get into all these other pieces, we're going to stay here and focus on the work that we're doing and that we've been doing for a very long time and are good at.
What a great way to really get to know your staff and then create that focus going forward. What was the outcome? Who are the people you serve and what is it that you're doing?
Specifically, Seattle neighborhoods that have disproportionate levels of crime and that have not as much investment from the government as some other neighborhoods. I mean, you're from this area, there's definitely some areas that have more resources than other areas. And there's some areas that tend to have higher levels of crime. And so those are the areas where we want to have our focus. And those areas tend to be areas that have like high levels of immigrants, refugees, BIPOC people who were housing insecurities. And then the work we're doing, we're really into place-based work. So really focusing in on a neighborhood and working with the people there and not just going in there and saying, okay, these are what we think needs to be done, but going in, and oftentimes we're invited to go in and saying, okay, what are the concerns here? What are the issues here? And working with them and giving them the tools and resources and connecting them with other people so that they can do this on their own, and we have a model, called our hotspot model. We'll go in for a couple of years. We'll do an assessment. We'll work with the folks there, businesses, community. And then the idea is that we step back and we leave, we're not completely leave, but, we're
they're self-sustaining.
absolutely, and all about asset-based, really going in and figuring out, okay, how can we support rather than telling people what to do?
I'm curious, I grew up in the South End and my family had definite housing instability. I moved many, many times in my life. And then in high school, I remember, you had mentioned that you had experienced homelessness. I moved out of my parents' house in high school and got my own apartment. My dad co-signed on my apartment for me so I could try to create my own stability. I'm curious about displacement, right? That we come into these communities and try to create sustainability, but I think about how many times I moved. I'm just thinking about displacement as a whole. That's a tough part of it.
Yeah, no, we definitely see it. Yeah.
I like that you're focusing on the community, because maybe if we focus on the community, it might be easier for people to come in and stay.
And one of our roles we play is being that bridge between community members and government and entities. A lot of people, particularly the volunteers, like they can't do it full time. Like they can't be calling and emailing and showing up to stuff all the time. We kind of can help fill that gap and be that bridge between what we're hearing from community members and communicating that with like the mayor's office and city council, and say, this is what we're hearing, people, these are the needs that we're hearing.
Yeah, that's really amazing. What would you say is your biggest roadblock right now, or challenge that you guys are working on?
I would say funding. 90% of our funding comes from city contracts. Last year, the city of Seattle had a pretty significant revenue shortfall. And when they were going through all the contracts, one of our biggest contracts, which we've got like 4 people that employees in that contract, we would have gotten half the
Wow.
money. So it would have just gutted like programs and staff. And so I emailed our board and I said, okay, guys, I need your help. And I even reached out so I'm the 3rd director of Seattle Neighborhood Group, the founder and the person before me. Really wonderful to have that resource. I still in contact with them. I reach out to them occasionally. I reached out to them and I said, hey, Kate, this is what's happening. And they wrote letters to the city council. The board wrote letters to the city council. I reached out to some of our community partners, said, this is, they're proposing to cut this pretty significantly. We need your support. And so I just called the ball and really reiterated, okay, this is important. And we had just finished our most recent evaluation of our hotspot work, and on this report that the work we do significantly reduced crime in these areas. And so I sent this to all the council members and I said, okay, this is the work we're doing. This is an evaluation we did. This third party, we're not, they're doing this independently. The work we're doing makes a difference and you need to fund us. And they did. It was pretty amazing. We had a couple of council members who were just our champions. And not only did we get all that funding back, we also got an increase for inflation. So it was it was
That's a
like
huge win.
best case scenario. We still face that challenge because we did that last year, but who's to say life doesn't change, and circumstances can change, and we may be in that situation again. And so I'm working really hard to just figure out different revenue streams. We're a very small team. We've got 8 people. I have no development team. It's just me. Trying to fundraise and run the organization is pretty challenging.
Yeah, I feel like this is the singing song of so many nonprofit executive directors. I've had the pleasure of speaking with quite a few on this podcast, and the challenge of funding to do these great things, and then recognizing that without the funding, those great things don't happen. And we actually impact communities much more than we think
Right.
with these nonprofit efforts. That's a challenge. How do you lead your team in a way where that scarcity or survival mode doesn't take over?
I guess I just I'd focus on the work and say, I know that the work we're doing is important. And so just like how I lobbied to these city council members to be able to show that this is important work, it's making a difference in the community.
One of the things I like to ask about is looking at transformational moments in your own career, in your own life. When we go through hardships, or we go through things that are really uncomfortable, or we have experiences that we've never experienced before, we come out the other side a little different and with more understanding of ourselves. Is there a story or an experience that you could share with us that really exemplifies this idea around, this is Thomasina before and this is Thomasina after, because I learned so much about myself through this experience?
Yeah, I like that question. I was thinking about it a lot. I was almost like prepared for that, like to step into that crisis mode of like, if you don't figure this out, there's going to be no more nonprofit. Like it was kind of that
Right.
dire.
Well, that is such an interesting, poignant moment in your leadership career, recognizing like, I can be a leader, but when crisis hits, I can be a leader.
Yeah, and do what I needed to do to get through it and to keep the organization going.
And you did it. Here you are.
And it's helped me because it's like things will happen and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
if
but
I
there was that.
that
If I could do that, I could do this.
exactly.
You had mentioned experiencing homelessness in high school. How has that impacted some of your advocacies today?
Definitely have a heart, particularly for children. That was my own experience. I think it's given me a lot of empathy. It's given me a perspective for sure about what people are going through. I don't say credibility, but I guess just people can, not that they don't believe me, but I guess when
Like
I say
relatability, maybe.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
better
Hmm.
word of it. Yeah, that experience forced me to grow up pretty fast. I was about 16 when that was all happening, and have a younger brother and a mom. So it was just the three of us, and I had to kind of be the one to step up and figure stuff out. And my mom, I think she was just overwhelmed with everything. Was just trying to hold it together.
I think a lot of
And
people don't realize how close so many people are to homelessness. It just takes one more hit.
yep, you get sick, you miss a paycheck, you lose your job. And then you find yourself in a bad situation. Yeah. Like I said, I had to grow up pretty fast. And there's a loss in that, when I think about high school, it's not happy. I didn't get to do dances. I didn't get to do fun stuff. It was like working part-time at a restaurant so my paycheck can pay for our family to stay in a hotel. That's what I was worried about, and getting me and my brother to school every day. We would go to a park and they'd have the bathrooms there, and that's where I would kind of try to wash up or brush my teeth, and that's why I'd go to practice my flute, and so I think it's forced me to just be more resilient, in these experiences. It's not like you want them, but I guess they shape you into who you
They do
are.
shape who you
But
are.
yeah.
Has it helped you find that joy in childhood raising your own kids now?
Oh, that's a nice question. Yeah, I try to just focus on giving them good memories, I guess. Yeah. I mean, they're still pretty young. They're 8 and 4, so shielding from that stuff, I don't want them to ever have to worry about that stuff.
When I was in my undergrad work, I looked at, I was in K-12 education. I was looking at breaking behavioral patterns or familial patterns. And typically it takes an average of 6 generations to break a poverty cycle or a drug and addiction cycle or a violence cycle. When we think about that and we have these opportunities to break cycles earlier, right? Like the people that are able to kind of hit transformative moments, make behavioral changes, and somehow break the cycle, you have this opportunity then to create the spaces for your children to be a little bit less vulnerable and more protected from those, and have the joy that maybe we had to sacrifice in our own lives for a little bit.
Yeah. 6
Mhm.
generations. Wow.
Yeah, that's the number. I mean, I don't know if it's, that was a statistic from 2007, so it
Mhm.
could be a little different now, but that was the research that was coming out at the time, that it takes 6 generations to break some type of familial cycle. And if we think about that in terms of, slavery, or in terms of civil rights, or women's rights, or things like that, I mean, we're still in the thick of it. If you think
Right.
about it that way.
Making those changes. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But those younger guys, I'm so excited for them. So much more hope in the world. You had mentioned a really great resource when we first chatted that you wanted to recommend to our listeners.
Susie Orman. I've listened to her for years. I used to watch her show, and she's got a really great podcast. It's called Women in Money. She's got dozens of books, and you can also check them out. Susie would say, don't buy it if you can't afford it. Just check it out from the library. But I love listening to her. I've learned so much from her. Yeah, absolutely. Same as you. Like I didn't have a lot of financial training, particularly as a young adult. So I had to kind of figure it out on my own. And I've learned a lot from her. Yeah, one I've started listening to recently is Nonprofits Are Messy by Joan Gary. So she's got a lot of really good insights, and she's got like the Nonprofit Leadership Lab, a lot of great tools on there. And there's a TED Talk she did that I think is really good. So people can check that out. And then another podcast, I discovered this about a year ago, Captivate the Room. It's by Tracy Goodwin. Her
Oh, I don't know
podcast,
this
she
one.
talks a lot about your voice and the message it's giving across. And last year she did these workshops on social media. So we could like record like a minute of yourself talking, post it on her Facebook page, and she would make comments on it and what she was hearing. And one of the things that I kind of got out of that is I have a tendency to over explain things. So if I say something and they're like, yeah, I get it, I keep talking and try to explain it. And
Mhm.
it's made me kind of stop and think, well, why am I doing that? Why do I have to feel like I have to keep talking? Why I have to keep saying words? Is it because I don't think they really believe me, or I'm not feeling confident? So it's been really helpful. Mhm.
I always like to ask if there's anything that you wish I would have asked you, because I know we've just had a wonderful conversation over lots of topics, but I'm curious, is there anything we didn't cover that's just really important?
Yeah, I'd like to share something a little more personal too. I'm actually a two-time cancer survivor. When I was a child, I had lymphoma in my lungs, went through chemotherapy, radiation, lost all my hair and everything. I was 7 at the time. Having cancer as a child and being homeless as a teenager, those two experiences definitely have shaped me. But most recently, I was diagnosed with DCIS, which is early stage breast cancer, earlier this year, and had a mastectomy. I was very fortunate that it wasn't invasive, so I didn't have to do any radiation or chemo. But I guess I just wanted to share that because, 1 in 8 women in the United States will deal with breast cancer. And I wasn't sick. I just had a mammogram. I kind of kicked myself on this because I had been doing these screenings because of my health background. But, when I had my daughter and my son in the pandemic, I kind of got out of the habit of doing it. I was just living my life. Like, I didn't feel any lumps even when I did when I met with the doctors and they did exams. They're like, they don't feel anything. And so, like, I could have went years.
Yeah, everybody
So,
go touch your
yeah,
boobies today.
yeah.
Go get those things checked out. You're absolutely right, though. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us got out of our healthcare maintenance during COVID. I know
Yeah.
I didn't go for 2 years. I did not go to the doctor for anything.
Mhm.
So I'm really glad you were able to find that early on. But yeah, everybody should be going and getting checked.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I prefer the ones where they smash your boob in there. Like, get in there. I want you to, like, find all the things.
Where I had the cancer, it was dense breast tissue, and they actually brought me back in. And I know some areas, they don't always do that. So,
Mhm.
if you've got dense breast tissue, make sure you insist on, extra screening. Because if you catch it early, you have a better outcome. So,
Absolutely.
um,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for that. That's absolutely huge. Women's health. We got to talk about it more.
And I know as women, it's like it's easy to put everybody else above yourself, right? You got all these, work obligations, family, and it's like, oh, I'll just schedule that later. And we really need to make ourselves the priority and make sure we're taking care of ourselves.
It's been such a pleasure getting to know you, Thomasina, and your organization and all the things about you. I'm excited to chat with you again in the future and see the good work that you're doing out there in Seattle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good to chat with you.
Thanks for joining us today in the Executives Lounge, where we bust open the doors, slam through the ceilings, and make sure that we have a spot at the table and that we are the lounge. I am Christine Fauner, your executive leadership expert, continuously looking for those executive leaders that seek community, continuous learning, and have a desire to find the next adventure. Join us next time. Join our Facebook group, Roam Your Soul, and you can also find us on Instagram at Roam Your Soul. And don't forget to check out the website for upcoming adventures, www.roamyoursoul.com. And if you're looking for that next executive level leadership coach, you can find me at roamyoursoul.com/Christine Fauner Coaching.